I want to jump to one last story here because I found this one fascinating. It comes from the Barna Group, which is a Christian research organization. And there was one thing in there that I wanted to show all of you. It's this survey right here. Check this out. So this is from the Barna Group. They surveyed a bunch of Protestant senior pastors. And whoops, there we go. There we go. They did it in 2015. They interviewed these pastors in 2015, then again in 2022. And look at the question at the very top here. It is becoming harder to find mature young Christians who want to become pastors. That's an interesting thing because they're basically saying, do you have a succession plan, pastors? Are there young people who want your job? And you could see at the top here in 2015, can you see this? I hope you could see this. In 2015, 24% of pastors said, I agree strongly. It's really hard to find a succession plan. 45% of them agreed somewhat. And look at the numbers now in 2022. 34% of pastors say, yeah, I really have a hard time finding young people to take my spot. And yeah, 41% say they agree somewhat, but that's a bigger chunk than it was before overall. So all these pastors are saying it's really hard to find young people who want to become pastors later on in life. And some of that has to do with a society that's just getting older in general. We have this like gerontocracy where Mitch McConnell and Dianne Feinstein and people like that, and Nancy Pelosi now, and Biden and Trump, and they're all in their late 70s, early 80s, and they refuse to step off. There's no bench. They're not trying to build up a bench. They're not looking very hard to see who's going to take up their mantle in the future. That's part of it. But the weird thing is churches I thought they were actually pretty good at having a pipeline because they have so many programs in place where you could be a full-time Christian if you wanted to. You could run a college group. You could be a youth pastor. That's supposed to, I thought, be a segue into becoming, a regular pastor. I know it's not the same job. It's not like minor leagues to major leagues. But again, there's so many ways that if you wanted to be a professional Christian, and I mean that in a good way, you could do it if you wanted to. So I thought they had that in place. But on the other hand, I'm going to show you this here. Seminaries have seen a decline in enrollment. Christian colleges are closing. Church attendance is going down. Young people are less religious than ever before. Look at this survey. This is not from Barna. This is from the Survey Center on American Life, but basically more than a third of Gen Z identifies as religiously unaffiliated. And basically, if you look at the top right, the top row, I know it's a little hard to see because it's really tiny. I'll try to blow it up here a little bit. That top line here, the dark part on the far left there is white evangelical Protestant. And as you get younger, that black bar is getting smaller and smaller. That's a smaller share of evangelical Christians. That purple part of the graphs on the right, you can see the percentage of unaffiliated people is getting larger and larger the younger you go. So Christians are kind of losing options there, which is an interesting thing to bring up as well. The Christian Post also mentioned that some Christian denominations, like the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, they said they had a shortage of at least 600 pastors. So what's going to happen? That means those churches, when the pastor who's there right now dies or retires, there's no one to take their spot. And if they can't recruit someone else, those churches are going to fold up. They're going to get sucked into a larger church or something like that. So mega churches will get larger. There are those jobs are not going away. But what's going to happen when a lot of these churches die out? It's weird that there's no farm system in place for white evangelical Christians, and that seems strange. Then again, what would it even mean if they had a good pipeline? Because the most popular pastors in the country, They're not in charge because they have theological degrees or they worked their way up in church. They're just people who took over a church and happen to have a lot of charisma. Like Joel Osteen got his church because his father basically died and he took over. People like Greg Locke, Mark Driscoll, they founded their church and then they realized that if they just yell on stage and act alpha male ish, they're going to attract a lot of followers. You know, if you mix like Andrew Tate with Bible verses, you'll get a following. And they figured that out, and that's their whole thing. But none of them are known for like their theology. They're not known for being experts in the Bible. They're just good at commanding an audience and getting attention on stage. They know how to yell in front of a camera. Like, I'm not even joking when I say this. I think you're going to see a whole generation of pastors who are not trained in seminary. And I'm talking about the more popular pastors here in the future. They're not trained in seminary. They're trained on YouTube. They watch a lot of guys, the Joe Rogan types of people. They learn how to talk like that because they see it all the time. And then they just throw Bible verses into it and they call themselves a pastor, and they can because you don't need formal training to be a pastor in some denominations. And that's it. They will amass an audience. That's how right wing websites always work. That's how right wing audiences work. That's how Vivek Ramaswamy works. If you yell in Christianese or you yell in conservative code, you will get positive attention. And if you know how to do that and you're telegenic and you know how to smile and act confident when you do it, like there's a lot of people who will flock to you. And that's not good. That's not good for the country because the types of people, first of all, if you follow people like that, I'm worried about you. And if you are people like that, it's not like they're yelling on stage about let's help refugees, let's feed the poor. It's always like, let's keep women in line. Let's take over their bodies. Let's make sure trans people can't do XYZ. Um, Even younger evangelical Christians, by the way, even though they are less likely to agree on culture war issues compared to their parents' generations, the people who want to be pastors are not the more progressive Christians we are talking about. Like, I don't know. If older pastors are worried that no one wants to take over their churches, maybe they should be asking why young people are not necessarily drawn to their churches. Because if they're only preaching politics or they're only preaching bigotry and sexism, maybe the sort of people you want taking over your churches don't want to be there. And if you're not going to take sexual abuse seriously, and if you're replacing the Bible with the GOP platform or whatever Trump says, which is the same thing, then maybe a lot of young people don't want to be part of that. And then you're losing the good people who might want to take over churches like yours. And the weird thing is, this isn't even like the Catholic Church where we're asking young people to swear off sex and marriage. These are Protestant churches where you could do all that. You could have your family and still they can't find people who want to take their places. Um, Part of me thinks a lot of young Christians, they don't want to be a pastor for the same reason you don't want to do like PR for Twitter or you don't want to do PR for like a tobacco company. Like, yeah, it's a job and yeah, you'll get paid for it. But if you have to explain what you do for a living, the last thing you want is for everyone to be like, oh no, oh God, that's your job? And who wants to do that your entire life? Because the gospel message these days is never about being more like Jesus. It's more like, let me tell you all the conspiracy theories on Newsmax right now. So that's a problem for the church. But if it's a problem for the churches, and especially Protestant churches, that means it's going to be a problem for literally all of us, because those are the people who are going to set the political agenda in the future. So that should be scary.